Hello, hello, welcome everyone. We are so excited to be here with you. I'm just going to give a real quick rundown of what's going to happen and then we'll get into with my lovely panelists here. So we're talking about cover art today. Cover art can attract readers or repel them. As much as we like to think people won't judge a book by its cover, we know it's true. Learn how to commission cover art well, and let's think about the tropes or common elements you might want on the cover. Looking at you, Cozy Mysteries. And then we can worry less about our cover because we know it's going to be in good hands. So I'm going to share what our event is. That's this. Oh, again, I should have just copied this event. And before we get started, I'm going to share links to the other events going on too, just so you guys can be aware. If you guys don't know me, I am Amy Winters-Voss, also known as Shyredfox. I am the author of Rise, the Liminal Chronicles, and I'm accompanied by my lovely mod, Misa. You'll see her in the chat here. I had the opportunity a year and a half ago to be able to commission some great art for my cover for my book Rise, but I'm coming from the author side of things, and I'm here with three lovely cover art people, and they're going to be sharing the other side of that. So first, we have some business to take care of. It's Jamie's birthday. So if y'all want to welcome or say happy birthday to her, I believe I have the cake command set up. Oh, no, I don't. I will set it up so y'all can have some cake here in just a minute. Cake. It is on now. So everybody can have some cake, and you just type exclamation cake. You can have some cake. And then, Miss Jamie, would you turn to this side and blow out the candles? Oh, the other side, sorry. All right, she blew out the candles. Anyway, okay. So, Jamie, do you want to go and introduce yourself first?
Okay, so I am Jamie Dalton from Magnetra's Design. I love all things fantasy, so I tend to specialize in like epic, high fantasy, paranormal fantasy, that kind of stuff. I do have experience with cozies and typography covers and that kind of thing as well, but fantasy has my heart.
Okay, Mariah, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Mariah Sinclair. I am a cover designer. I've designed over 1,000 covers. I've niched recently in cozy mystery. I'm also the founder of the Cover Designer Directory.com, and that I created this resource to help authors find cover designers. And you can go and visit the site, and there's over 70, I think maybe even close to 100 cover designers there right now.
Excellent, excellent. And then Karen, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Karen from Arcane Covers, and I work in fantasy, sci-fi, and anything man-chest.
Alrighty. So I'm going to start getting into the questions, but before I ask you guys questions, I'm going to remind my viewers that if you use the use channel points down at the bottom, you'll see a little fox icon down at the bottom. Click on that and use that to do questions so that I can get them into the queue and we can ask them at the end of the stream. We'll depending on the number of questions, we'll start at about 20 to the hour or 15 to the hour, just so you guys kind of know how things will go. All right, so my first question for you ladies is, what is the purpose of a cover and who is a book cover for?
Who wants to start? I'll jump in. I think sometimes we get caught up in thinking that a book cover is art, and it can be art, but it's really packaging. So it is packaging your story to attract your perfect reader, not all readers. And when you create a great cover, potential readers will recognize it as a story they will love to read.
I always tell my clients it's a marketing image. It markets your book. It's there saying, read me, and it has to attract the right readers.
I kind of tell my clients similar. Like for me, your cover is your marketable window into your world, and it's my job to try and make it as close to attracting your target audience as I possibly can.
Very, very cool. So, why is cover art so important for books nowadays?
I think we've all heard that. Don't judge a book by its cover, and yet every single person who reads does exactly that.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not really judging. I mean, it's filtering. You know,
Yeah.
we have so much information that's coming to us all the time. And the thing that I think some authors don't quite understand is that readers know what books they like to read, and they know what those covers look like. Like they, you know, they know if they love vampire stories, they know what a vampire cover looks like. And your job as a cover designer and as an author is to make sure it aligns with the reader's expectations. And it's filtering, not necessarily judging.
Yeah, not judging the art, but judging whether you're going to like the book.
Well, and I think also another part of it too is that it tells your readers that whether or not this is something new, because a cover can become dated within just a couple years, just with fonts and colors and that kind of thing. And so having a cover that attracts the current audience is so important.
Those are excellent answers, and I'm learning as we go. This is awesome. Thank you. So, how does genre affect the style?
I'll let someone else start.
Go for it, Jamie.
Okay, I'm down for that. So genre changes literally every single aspect on a cover. Saturation of colors, what colors you use, the contrast, the composition, the fonts, even the like font treatments, it all completely changes it. I mean, even fonts, that's the number one mistake that I see people trying to make their own covers make. And it's normally that they choose a font that they love, but not normally the font that's right for their genre. And that literally subconsciously is a thing that will make or break whether or not it looks like it's a professional cover.
Yep. Genre really just dictates most indie designer decisions. Like
Yeah.
from your image content to your color palette, you know, just as Jamie was saying, it really having a clear idea of what the genre is or subgenre. If it's a genre mashup, what are the two genres you're mashing up? Your designers need that information because that's what we base almost all of our decisions on.
Yeah, it has to look like the genre because it comes back to the reader, and are they going to pick the cover because it shouts of that genre to them and they know they like that genre of story. So it has to match up.
Can you give us some examples of like a genre? So maybe urban fantasy or mysteries or...
Sure. Well, I'll talk just quickly about cozies since that's my specialty. A quick difference between paranormal cozies and what I call traditional but non-magic based cozy mysteries. I use very different color palettes for those. I will not use black on a traditional cozy cover, but I will use those deeper blues and blacks in paranormal. So that's just one way that really dictates, and that's a subgenre nuance, right? They're all cozy mysteries, but if it's paranormal, I'm using the purples, the blues, you know, those rich witchy colors. But if it's a traditional, I'm using generally a pastel palette, something that shows a lot more levity.
And if you get into like dark fantasy that I know Jamie and I do some of, think you've got like tropes with inside genres. So if you have a vampire cover, they can be either dark fantasy or they might be urban fantasy, but the trope is going to come across because there's a lot of red and then there's sort of a lot of desaturated stuff as well. So that comes across that way to show the reader that yes, it's a vampire story, and then you have other bits that'll show whether it's an urban fantasy or a dark fantasy story.
Yeah, and you know, kind of breaking down the three I normally work in, like epic fantasy, the background is so important as part of the composition, but when you look at like high fantasy, it tends to have a lot more detail around the edging of the cover and a lot more layers up close. And then like paranormal fantasy, like paranormal urban fantasy kind of stuff tends to have really high contrast, really high saturation that's balanced by really low saturation. And then also, like, again, fonts are like my biggest pet peeve. I will say that 100%. And like, so for example, if it's a fantasy, any type of fantasy book, normally like you want to go for a serif font. But if you're doing sci-fi, that kind of thing, you want to do sans serif. And it's a lot of times people accidentally will put like the author name in the wrong in sans serif on fantasy fonts. And like, again, pet peeves, but that's pet peeves of the readers too, honestly.
That's really, really interesting. And I think I goofed on the text on mine because I did the text on mine. I commissioned the artwork. So thank you. I will learn for the next one.
Just a side note, there are designers that offer just a titling for you. So if you commission Illustrator to do the art, and many high-end illustrators don't do typography the best or just don't even offer it as a service, you can go to someone. Karen, do you offer it right now?
I do. Yeah, I've done quite a few.
Yeah, and Jamie, do you offer it? Yeah, so when I did it, I don't anymore, but when I did it, it was only $50. Some do between $50 and $100 investment to do the typography, and that can just make it look so polished. You know, you spend $1,000 on an illustration, don't ruin it with poor subpar typography.
Yeah.
I do want to add with that, because like I said, Karen and I both do that, but I do have a rule that if I'm going to add that on, I need something in writing from the illustrator that gives me permission to do that, because technically I'm altering their art. And always remind your illustrator to, like, I need the font typography to go here. That way they don't accidentally put something really important there that makes it so that it'll disappear as soon as font goes on it.
Yeah, one of the last ones I did, it was for a top artist in this industry who does not do typography. He also did not leave me any room to do typography, and it was really frustrating. So your illustration might look a little off balance when it doesn't have the type on it. In fact, it probably should, and that's that spot for it. So, you know, if you're commissioning art and an illustrator, keep in mind, you're like, this looks a little off balance. There's probably going to be text there that's going to provide that balance.
Yeah, I've had to like go back to the illustrator and say, look, I need you to move this, and they've had to like move it all around just to, you know, give me space for some typography.
Yeah.
When I've had some that have given me stuff that it was gorgeous and it looked like there was room for typography, but the contrast was way too high.
Yep.
So I had no way to do any text without half of the text disappearing, because it was too variable of contrast across that section.
Yep, I've had that too.
Yep, I'm thinking of a sky with lots of pretty leaves and trees on it, and you have that high contrast with the sky, and they're like, put the title there. You're like, I can't.
Or a stained glass window, I've had that one.
Oh.
Yep, lots of darks and lights. So you want it to be even in the background, even, you know, whatever it is, whether it's light, dark, mid-tone's not the best, but just an even, like a blank canvas area for us to put those beautiful titles, because your title matters on a sales page. You know, just kind of bridging that into another conversation. It matters on sales pages. It depends on the genre if it needs to be noticeable at the very small thumbnail on Amazon, but at least on the single page, your title needs to be clear. Like you can't mess around with that.
If they can't identify it, how are they going to buy it?
Yeah.
And if you know who you're going to get to do the typography, you can always go to them first before you hire the illustrator and say, what instructions have you got, you know, illustration wise? And, you know, they can say, well, I need this much space at the bottom, you know, keep the values fairly sort of even down that section, and the same with this much space at the top, and so on. And they could be reversed, and just send that to the illustrator.
Yeah, You can even go one step farther and do the typography before and send it as a
Yeah.
ping. You might change the colors and stuff afterwards, but you could do black and white typography on a 6x9 book format and say, here you go. And it will probably take 1/3 of the illustration, and the illustrator will go, I didn't realize you needed that much room. And you're like, yes, yes, I do.
Could we also put the cover artist in touch with the typographer?
Yeah, I have been.
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
We're not mean.
Yeah. We're all here to make your cover work.
Yeah. We want the author to be successful.
Yeah.
Like, that's sometimes a misconception that authors have, that we're adversarial, and we want to see that cover and your book on the bestseller list as much as you do. It can make our career to see that, right? And it's just satisfying. I want authors to succeed. That's why I love this job. It's why I love being in indie publishing, is I want to help another creative succeed and maybe quit their corporate job. You know, like, I want to be a part of that dream.
Yeah, that's what we all do it.
Also,
Yeah.
There's also a bunch of cover designers that are authors as well. Like, I know Karen and I both write. And so it's kind of interesting because we all end up being part of like the same tight-knit community, and we really want to support each other. And then also, like, if you're going to work with an illustrator, I know several that will live stream, and I love, if I'm doing the typography for their stuff, I'll hop on their live stream and give them feedback during it. Like, I love when I get to do that. Nice. And there's a lot of cover designers that are illustrators that do the whole package.
Yeah.
Okay, our next question is, what should an author look for in a cover artist?
I guess I'll start. Someone who's done your genre. Look at their portfolio. Have they done your genre? Because if not, well, maybe they're not the cover artist for you. I think that's probably the most important thing, seeing something, not the same kind of content, but similar sort of style that you want. Because you don't want to approach someone and say, can you do this? And they're like, oh, I've never done it before, but sure, I'll give it a go, because you don't know what it's going to turn out like.
Yeah, there are some top designers that work in all genres. So you might have picked one of those, but if you're not spending $1,000 on a cover, definitely make sure the artist is familiar with your genre. That's just going to make a huge difference. And I've been now designing cozy for 3 years, pretty much exclusively. I've learned so much just in those 3 years about cozy design and watching what goes on the bestseller list. And like, I'm like a hawk on my bestseller list. Like, I'm always watching the trends, and I watch when they shift, and I try to adapt or not adapt, but figure it out. Like, I am watching the trends. And when a designer is niches like that, they are aware of what's going on in that genre. They know what's being released. They know what's coming down in, like, I know cozies that are going to be released in 6 months because I designed them. Like, I have a good feeling of what's going on in this little microcosm. And that's an asset for my clients.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, go ahead.
I was just trying to think of some other things that you should look for. Always, newer authors don't realize that top artists book out 6 to 12 months in advance many times. So that's something. Check with availability. Pricing. So a lot of artists list their pricing for an ebook cover on their website. What they may not share is how much a cover next in the series is, how much a full wrap is if you're getting a printed version. So if you are on a specific budget and you're comparing artists, make sure you're comparing all the things that you're going to want to buy, because a designer may charge $600 for the first and charge $400 for the second one. Another designer might charge $600 for the first, but charge $550 for the second one. You just don't know. So you need to ask that if you are trying to stick within a specific budget and are comparing designers on that level.
Yeah, you definitely, if you find someone who like works in that, they become basically like a marketing specialist for your cover for that genre. And that's only going to benefit you because your cover is your #1 marketing tool for your book. People aren't going to make it to the blurb unless they like the cover. Yeah, and also I always encourage people to reach out to their cover designer. I know I function differently than a lot of other designers. I like to have a little bit more interaction and one-on-one kind of stuff with them. So like I like to be able to bounce ideas back and forth. And a lot of times I'll almost do like an interview with somebody to find out if I want to work with them and if they are going to actually mesh with me, because I found I don't mesh well with people that just want cut and dry kind of thing. I need a bit of that push and pull process to really come up with something amazing. And it always comes out better when I have that. So definitely almost interview your designers. And then the other thing I wanted to mention too is when you're looking at prices on people's websites, ask what all is included in that price. For example, my customs, my ebook price on my website is like the starting price, and it's almost all of my covers are in that. But because I paint my people and I literally build them from scratch, every character that's added onto a cover, I have to charge for my time that I put into that. And so I do charge extra for characters that are added on. So you definitely want to look at that. And then also you want to look at their, oh my gosh, my brain just totally like,
It happens.
sorry.
You know, one thing I also recommend while you're thinking, Jamie, is do they have a legit website? Like, let's just talk. You're spending a decent amount of money. Are they a professional? Do they have a website? Do they convey themselves as a professional? You know, I hear horror stories about people who get scammed, and then I look at who they hired, and they just had a Facebook page. They just had this. I'm like, well, it's unfortunate you got scammed. I'm not blaming the victim. However, when someone's been in business like me for 5 years, when I have a website, when I have a lot of, you know, people I've worked with, chances of you getting scammed by me drop considerably. I mean, I don't do it. You won't get scammed by me, but like
Exactly.
I have presence that you won't get scammed by me. And so I encourage authors to filter, you know, the different ways they're finding. They might get recommendations, but if the person isn't presenting themselves 100% professional, I'd be concerned, you know.
Yeah. Do your due diligence.
Yeah, you're spending money.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I remembered. The other thing I wanted to say is when you're looking at someone, especially go to their website, one, look and see if they have terms and conditions. A lot of designers will have that on their website so you can see what you're getting into. And then also something that will help you, because you can find a cover designer in basically any price range. Honestly, you really can. And yes, the higher the price, typically the more experience and like the more marketability experience you're able to put into it. But you are able to also put in like ask them one of the biggest questions I always suggest is to ask if it's possible for you to get the links like after or down the road for any images they use. Because if they say no, that's a red flag. Run the other way. There's a very strong chance that they are using illegal images, because for stock photos, for us to be able to afford to sell our covers at the prices we do, we typically have to have a 500,000 cover, like 500,000 usage cap before the next level of stock image has to be purchased. And if they're not willing to let you know what images they used, there's a very good chance that they're not going to be legal images, and that will cause you all sorts of problems down the road. So I always suggest to ask if that's an option.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
actually
any
provide
reputable
that as,
designer. I'm sorry.
yeah, exactly.
Getting excited.
I send that information with the cover on every cover because it's so important.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd say you want to look for is communication. You know, if you've narrowed it down to say 3, contact them all. Who gets back to you? And also, you know, bear in mind, you know, weekends, evenings, and so on. But provided it's within business hours, are they getting back to you? Because if you've had to wait a week, they're not going to get back to you while you're in your cover either. Yeah. So make sure that they communicate properly with you and get back to you in a timely business day manner.
Excellent. I forgot to ask one before we kind of hit down this way. So one of them I want to go back to is how accurate should cover art be?
I'm going to start with this one. I made this mistake as an author. The most important thing your cover has to get across, like we've said before, is genre. If your character's boots are brown and their top is blue, it does not matter.
You know, part of that is, keep in mind, the cover is for people who haven't purchased or read your book, not for people who read the book.
Yeah.
Now, I personally think you should be within the realm. If your main character has blue eyes, that's a really simple change. So make them have blue eyes, you know, so be within the realm of what it is. But when you get down into the specifics of, she has a pink shoestring as a bracelet, she has, you know, so many of these details, or worse is when someone tries to give you some sort of fight scene that you want to put on a cover and you're like, oh, he'd be squatting. But they get so detailed on like the positionings of the people, and about 20 feet away would be this character, and you're like, well, that doesn't work on the physics of a cover. I can put them both in and I can make them facing each other, but, you know, get a little relaxed on when we're talking about, you know, spatial differences. And, you know, accuracy is important when it comes to aligning with your genre. That's where the accuracy needs to be. That's where we need to be on point and very clued into the realms of the genre. Accuracy for your story, you know, you don't want to bait and switch. You don't want to have a Golden Gate Bridge in the background for San Francisco and the story never is in San Francisco. Like, you know, some common sense, but really focusing in on tiny details that are going to literally be 5 pixels big in a thumbnail.
Yeah, I've
it's
had
not
that,
as
like,
important.
Yeah. Oh, my character wears an earring. It's like, dot, there it is.
It's true. It's so true.
Well, and especially since I work in epic fantasy a lot, I get a lot of those kinds of requests where they're like, I want to do this awesome scene. And I'm like, that's a cool scene to have in your head, but the composition will not draw the reader, the potential reader's eye to your cover. It's going to move it past your cover. So like, let's reimagine this and let's see how we can make this work so it's going to sell, but it still represents your book. So yeah, that's definitely, that is one thing that you can tell. If you hire an illustrator, that's one like big red flag that you can tell if it's an illustrator that does not normally work on covers, is they don't understand the difference between art composition and book cover composition for that genre, because they are completely different.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Okay, we've talked a little bit about this, but where can we find cover artists? And we are posting some of the links you guys had in the chat, just so you know. But go ahead and tell us where we can find you guys and other cover artists.
Well, I think authors have really struggled with this, and that is why I created the cover designer directory. And it's genre based, so know your genre. Go and click and you'll find artists that serve that genre, because genre is so important. So you can do Google searches, you can go into Facebook groups, and all of that can be cumbersome. If you are in a writing group, especially if it's a genre specific writing group, ask them. Also, the Look Inside feature on Amazon. Go through, look, especially those that are in Kindle Unlimited, because they're probably going to be indie, and some traditional artists don't work with indie self-published authors. So look through and start collecting names when you see them. You're probably reading in your genre. Open up the books that you've already bought, because sometimes authors like to hide our names in the back. So go and look in the back if you're reading your genre. The covers you like will lead you to a great cover designer.
Yeah, that's how I found my cover designer when I was back when I was an author. I Googled it, cover design fantasy, and I looked through, I don't know how many websites, and looked for the style that I liked. I'm like, I really like this guy's covers. I'm going to go with him. And I would recommend sort of doing that as well. Just look through all the different places you can go. If you're on Discord, look through various like cover artist streams, you know, get to know them, meet them, see their work, and then go from there.
Yeah. Something to keep in mind in the indie industry, you know, authors are wearing so many hats. Like, you know, what you are doing as a self-published author was really like multiple departments in a traditionally published world, right? You've got your art department, your marketing department, your editing department, your ad buying department. You know, you've got all of that. You're one person. So you're actually kind of an art director, which you may not be quite ready to be. So, you know, research, that's your number one tool. Look at mood boards for your genre. The Cover Designer Directory has a whole, I think I've got over 40 mood boards now on Pinterest of different genres and different themes. You know, start researching, start collecting names, and research is going to be your number one tool as a newly like assigned art director in publishing, because that's kind of what you are in wearing that role, which is a little bit overwhelming. That's why you want a skilled, like specialized cover designer in your genre, so you can like kind of not be the art director anymore.
Yeah, that's what I say. Spend your time researching, finding the right person, and then trust them to be the art director.
Yeah, and when you, I found a lot of, when I started book cover design, because I was looking for a book cover designer, and I was like, I can totally do this. Like, why am I not doing this to fund my books? What's wrong with me? But make sure that when you look at the inside of books, double check the cover for ebooks, because sometimes authors will forget to change the copyright information inside of the book. So like there's some authors that I love that on Amazon it shows up with the right cover, but then their ebook on Kindle Unlimited will have their old cover with the old cover designer. So make sure to check and make sure that those covers match. And then also I mostly like function off of social media. That's kind of my niche. And like, for example, I'm an admin for a couple of the Facebook marketplaces. I'm an admin for book cover events, and then also one for indie author playmates. And there's a lot of designers in both of those. And then if you are someone who's like social media, just do like a hashtag search even for book cover designer or that kind of stuff. Because anytime I'm posting, and I know I'm not the only one, because there's a lot on there that I see and I look underneath the search, but most people will hashtag something like that to make it easy for authors to find them on social media and be able to connect.
Yeah.
Okay, what is the process like when working with the cover artist?
Chaos. There's paper flying everywhere, paints. It's just, it's crazy, man. Ideally, it's not. And this is why you go with a professional. You know, I'm going to say it's really different. You know, like some people book months and months in advance. So you put down a deposit, and then a month right before your thing, you say, please fill out this form. Tell me what your thing is. Some, like Jamie was mentioning, doing multiple like interviews and maybe multiple concepts. What Jeff, he does like Zoom calls, right? Like concept
I do as well.
Zoom calls. And okay, Karen does Zoom calls. You should be charging more then. But we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that later. You know, so really everyone is different. I mean, right now I'm only working on series continuations for my existing clients. So I just send them the covers. I know what's up. Like they fill out the form, I send out the cover, they give me a thumbs up because there's no conceptualizing. Like it's already been defined kind of what this series looks like. So it's a really quick process. But there is some like back and forth. And I really think this is when like knowing what you like working with as an author, like what type of personalities you like working with can come into play. Because every relationship truly is unique. How do you guys work with clients?
Well, I start off, and I'm now quite big on Discord and from my process and stuff. So I actually have a client channel that I, give them a role, and they are the only person that can see it. And it's a chat channel and a voice channel. So dependent on what they want to do, not everyone likes this, but some do, I will go into voice channel and we just lay out the outline of the cover then and there with them on the call, because they know what they're getting. You know, I hate surprises when it comes to cover design and stuff. I like to know that they like where I'm going with it. And so I communicate quite a lot, probably a lot more than most people, but that's what works best for me. So I will get them on. If I'm using DAS, then I will have them help me pick the character and the clothes, and then I sort of get the pose going and so on. If I'm using photos, again, sometimes we'll go through it together. Sometimes I'll just give them sort of 4 or 5 options and then go from there. But it's all done in that first initial video call, which if it's a brand new author, from my experience, they tend to feel a lot more comfortable doing that, because they know that they're actually gonna get what they were hoping for at the end of it. So
I would say that's really good for brand new authors, actually.
and I work with a lot of brand new authors.
Yeah, that's great. There needs to be people that do. Like, there's a whole range. You know, I like working with more established authors that literally tell me the title and the subgenre and say, do it. And there's a cat on it. I'm like, cool.
Yeah,
I got
love
it.
that too.
You know, and I just do it. I send it. They give the thumbs up. Like, they do not want to mess around. They don't want to nitpick. They just want it done because they've got other stuff to do. So that's important, you know? Yeah, that's important to know. There's some designers that are so great with brand new authors, you know, and I'm going to put, Karen, now that I know that your process, I'm going to add you to my list of referrals for brand new authors, because there's a whole range of what designers like working with too.
Yeah, there is. Jamie, what's yours?
Yeah, I'm definitely a communication person as well. I have a 2-year-old, so I work through the middle of the night. I'm kind of like a vampire most of the time. So I tend to do, I tend to either create a Google Doc or a Pinterest board, both of them private, and we will like add stuff to it and communicate back and forth. And I like to go do a lot. And if an author is having a hard time with trying to communicate, I'm pretty sure that I'm like the cover designer, like recovery designer, because I get so many referrals from people who have been burnt so badly before just because they didn't have a designer that had the right kind of communication for them, or like, so I get referred a lot of those people because I do so much back and forth. And you know, if someone's having a hard time, I will send them to deposit photos and say, hey, like, why don't you send me a couple things that you love and we'll work with that. And I'm like, Karen, I do DAS, I 3D render my own people most of the time and a lot of different objects. And then I tend to paint everything. It's so much easier for me to be able to give a rough draft to somebody if I've already got a pose. And honestly, most of my authors I work with, I have a couple that come to me with very specific, clear ideas, but most of the ones I work with are new and very inexperienced and just don't know how to present what they want, or they're too afraid to screw up on the marketing of this, so they just trust me. So like, I love authors that will let me ask a ton. Like, I actually will turn down people if I can't find out anything about your book, because I want to make a character that's going to represent your character to the best of my ability. I want to be able to, like I said, it's a window to your world. Like, I need that information. I love the ones that will actually send me like a copy of what they have written already, so that I can like really get into it and almost like get like fan art. Like, as a reader, this is what I would want to see for your cover. I love those authors so much.
You should also be charging more.
Nice.
We're gonna have a little powwow about this.
I'm currently booked out till November, with like the first quarter of next year partially booked out as well. So I'm like, yeah, I need to adjust some of my process.
Yeah, we probably don't want to talk about this author facing, but we'll talk about that privately. I mean, and this is what it comes down to. So, you know, as we're talking a little bit about pricing, cover designers should be able to make a living. We are skilled, we are talented, we are helping the sales of your book. We have a lot of different skills that go into that. We should be absolutely able to make a living through that, even in the indie side of the business. And, you know, sometimes people downplay this because authors might consider what they're doing kind of a side hustle or a hobby, but cover designers don't. Most cover designers I know are actually supporting families on there. I support myself. I don't have anyone else paying my bills. So I have to price accordingly to how many hours and my skill set that I spend on a cover. Like it's how it works. Like this is how it works. So that is something to keep in mind when always diving for the cheapest option, is that cover designers should be able to make a living off of this. Like this is a real skill. It is a real talent. It is a real business. Like we're running businesses over here.
Yeah.
This isn't a hobby for us.
Others do too.
And it's kind of cool too, because cover designers, like the majority of us, we want to do everything possible to make it so that authors can afford covers. Like it's not like we're trying to rip off people. Like no, I cringe anytime I raise my prices because I want to help everybody, and I'm so glad, you know, some cover designers are able to set up payments. PayPal actually just set up a system that some cover designers are able to do that'll break up covers into payments to make it more affordable for people. And actually, if money, I'm just kind of saying this really quick, if money is a like there's just absolutely no way, which again, you can find cover designers at any price, but there's also so many new, especially new authors, have no idea that there's such a thing as pre-made book covers that saves you a ton of money. And it's for a lot of people, they're able to sell them cheaper, like myself, because I use them as my practice things when I'm working on new skills. And it doesn't take me as much time to make them because it's just my opinion going into this pre-made cover.
Yeah.
And it's still super marketable. Like I'm still doing all of the same stuff I would for a custom, and the typography on it always changes. It goes to whatever your book is. Unless, I will say, sometimes for like a actual typography cover,
Yes.
those can't always change because it's literally like so ingrained in it.
It is the cover.
Yes. But other than that, like pre-made covers are a really good way to be able to save some money while you're doing that. And then also, again, like I said earlier, cover styles, they change. And they change, typically they start to shift every couple of years. And so there is nothing wrong with you buying what you can afford and trying to get as marketable of a cover as you can in your budget. And then in a couple of years, when you've saved up money, you made some money off of your books, to get them recovered. I just did a recover for a best-selling series that was still selling fairly well. But as soon as we did the change, because I know when I write, most books are able to hit multiple target audiences. And we just changed the direction. It's same genre, but just changed the target audience and hit the tropes for that specifically. And it completely changed their sales. They got thrown into a whole bunch of extra stuff. Like Amazon was boosting them like crazy.
Cool.
Like there's nothing wrong with doing that. That's what most people do. And traditional publishers, nowadays, they have an art director and they hire indie cover designers to do their covers because they see the skills that we are presenting to it and the research that we're doing. Most trad houses don't have in-house cover designers anymore. They just have an art team that hires us.
Yeah, I can vouch for that because I'm one of those us that got hired by one.
Okay, we are at the point where we're probably going to have to start answering questions, but there were some things in the chat that you guys didn't get to see because I don't think you're watching the chat. Some people were very excited about the usage of DAS, just so you guys know. There is support. It says, adjust some pricing to reflect your hard work, ladies.
Yay, that's wonderful.
And then there was some question. Somebody was like, oh, I want to reserve now, but I don't have my book written. And I'm like, please have your first draft at least. So
at least have your genre and your title squared in. Now, the more advanced you are as an author, the less you can get away with. Like if you're a new author, yeah, have it pretty much done, you know. But if you're an advanced author, you can book 6 months ahead. You know the title, you know.
Yeah.
And again, some of these designers do book 6 months. So if you know you're going to have it written by then, at least get your slot in there. I'm booked out for the rest of the year. Karen, how far are you booked out?
I'm actually pretty wide open because
Yay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, it's awesome. It's great because that's that kind of variable that we need in this industry. And so, you know, but it's, if you join cover designer directory Facebook group. We talk about when people are open and they post their availability, which also helps if you need something quicker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and also, if you aren't sure, like if you're still in the beginning stages, that is the prime time to go find a pre-made cover, because you don't have everything set in your mind yet, and use that as your inspiration as you're writing your book. Like, save some money, find an amazing pre-made cover, and and
right to the cover.
love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right to the cover. Most of my authors do that. Most of my pre-mades are bought. They keep the titles. They write to the cover. They inspire it. They say it's so much less stress. They just write a story to fit the cover they bought.
Yeah, same.
Okay. In order to get to questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the question and we're going to go around in a circle. Okay, so we'll start with you, Jamie. Your question from Sky Ardens is, what is a typical standard cover art style when there's characters involved? Is it always painted or can it be cel shaded? Yes, genre effects, but I might be in a weird spot.
Yeah, genre is everything with that. So for example, the more fantasy, more into epic and high fantasy, the more you're going to want it to be illustrated. But there's a lot of cover designers like myself that use stock photos and then bash and overpaint stuff so it looks illustrated, but it doesn't cost you illustrated prices. But then there's other genres, like the more into urban fantasy, and a lot of the more into, how to put it, basically certain genres you need to have actual, like romance. Part of why I don't do romance anymore, romance almost always requires actual stock photos. So it really breaks down to your genre itself on the kind of person. Like with Mariah, I do some cozies, I don't do as many. It's not my like heart job, but you know, those are vectors and illustrated, and it's a different, like just different for different genres.
And there's other genres that have to be fully illustrated.
Yeah.
Like wuxia, it's got to be illustrated. You can't use stock photos at all.
Okay, next question will be for Mariah. This is from Misares. What are some examples of fonts specific to genres? I had no idea this was a thing.
Oh, good question for me. Love fonts. So, I mean, yeah, you'll notice if you go and look at urban fantasy, you will see a lot of more decorative fonts, what's called black letter. Some of it is serif, but they have these great alternate characters with these swashes. You go to Cozy, and Cozy will have well, cozier fonts. Like, it's kind of in the name. It will be this friendly, glad to meet you font. I think fonts have more personality than people. And the font really gives you that tone of what genre it is. It just nails it. And I've created on Creative Market some collections for science fiction and urban fantasy and fantasy, I think, that I have hundreds of bookmarked fonts to help authors and designers kind of weed through that. So each genre kind of has its own friendliness. Like, even if you look at romance and you go with sweet romance, you'll find a more feminine, curvy, but casual font, where if you look for steamy, it might still be a handwritten font, but it's more angular. Like, it's more intense. It's got that lustful feeling to it. Like, again, I think fonts have more personality than people. So maybe I was the wrong person to ask. Move on, because I'll just keep talking. An hour of fonts with Mariah and another place. Like,
I'm with you on the fonts. I love fonts, but we do have 3 more questions and we just have limited time here. So the next question is for Karen. This is from Alivandra. The question is, how do cover artists feel about a sketch idea the writer puts together for the cover?
I have actually worked with that. I know that the actual cover in question, quite a few designers did turn it down, so some don't like that. It doesn't mean that the designer will want to stick with that sketch as well, because they might have the experience that you don't have to say that actually that won't work as a cover, but they will be able to tell you why and explain that won't work, so that you're happy to move on to something that does. And other times, perhaps the person grew up as an artist and they're actually had a good idea, in which case, great, that gives me a start and I can go from there. So totally depends on the different designer.
And I would just say a sketch is really good at communicating. Like, use it as a communication tool. Be flexible on your cover matching what you sketched. Think of it as a tool for communicating with the designer, not as a recipe for what you're going to get.
I do have an experience because this is what I gave my cover artist a sketch, and she's like, it's got to be more dynamic. That's too flat. And I was like, oh man. But then what she had, I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah. Okay, next question. We just have 2 more questions, but I'm still going to go around. So, Jamie, I'm going to ask you from SL Funk. Does title play as big a role in design as genre?
Kind of depends on if you mean the name of the title or the like typography of the title, because the name of your title for your book, definitely you have to make sure that you've picked the right thing for your right genre, because some titles just will not work for the other thing. Even if it's related to your book, it can tell the reader the wrong one. If you're talking about like the typography of it, the fonts and the work done on it, that there's a lot of art that can be multiple genres, and it's the typography itself that will actually put it in the specific genre and target audience it needs to be. And so really, that is the hardest thing for newer cover designers to learn, is how to do the right type of typography for the right genres, and just how to make it look pretty, because that's really, really hard. When you get it, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm amazing. Yeah.
That is an awesome answer. All right, we have one last question. Karen did not get to talk as much, so I'm going to pick Karen for the next question. This is from Sky Ardens. Is it frowned upon to ask for or commission something like a sketch sample for a cover just to see how an artist will render a character?
I can't speak for a straight illustrator, but I would say the majority of my time goes into the initial mock-up and getting it done. So you're basically asking me to commission a cover and then possibly not pay for it. So I don't work like that. I will ask you whether you like my style, and if you do like my style, then you've got a chance of liking the end book. And because I'm showing it to you all the way through as we go, I know you'll like the end book. And so that's the way I work, rather than, oh, can you show me what you might do? No, I don't like that. I'm going elsewhere. No, look through my portfolio. If you don't like my style, I'm not the designer for you. If you do, come talk to me. I think that's the better way of doing it, because otherwise you're going to have a lot of people going, well, I've put all this work in and, nothing. And I could have spent my time doing something else.
We do have about 2 or 3 more minutes, so if you guys, the others, want to jump in on this question, we can, and then we'll probably have to wrap up. So.
Oh, on the basically what you're asking is what's called spec work, and spec work is frowned upon because there's a chance of us, it's a gamble, it's a high risk, have our portfolio inform if you like our work. That's what really, look at artists that have substantial portfolios in your genre and you can see their style, and that's going to let you know if you like it. You might want to see if the designer offers refunds. That might, if you're that concerned about that, check and see if they offer refunds, and that's going to vary from author to author. From designer to designer.
Yeah, I was about to say kind of along the same lines. One, look at their deposit policy. Every designer requires a different deposit at different times, different percentage of the total cost. So look at that, because sometimes it's refundable, sometimes it's not. And the same sort of thing with, I will say my biggest worry with doing that kind of thing, like I said, it takes a lot of time, but also most authors will not do this. So I'm not worried about it with most authors, but there's that one person that ruins it for everybody. And when we do a mock-up like that, we have to worry about them taking our concept that comes from our marketability and taking it to someone else who's cheaper to basically finish it. And so most designers will not offer that because of that problem. And most people that will do a refund, if it doesn't work out, it's in exchange for us being allowed to alter it and sell it as a pre-made to get the money back from the time that we spent.
I guess the other thing I wanted to add on this is there's a thing called custom pre-mades, and some designers do this. Not all designers by a long way, certainly none of the top, sort of really busy designers, but the newer designers will offer what's called a custom pre-made. And it has sort of boundaries on it, as in, we're going to turn it into a pre-made and sell it to someone else if you say no. And it has to be in a genre that is easy to resell if you don't like it. So I'll take one, say, sort of a vampire one. I know what a vampire's cover looks like. And therefore, if you don't sell it, it's got so many genre markers in it, someone else will buy it. But that means that you can't have any specifics. So you can't go, well, I want a vampire cover, but I want it green, because I'm never going to sell a green vampire cover to anyone else. So it's got to be super, super genre specific, in which case, why not just find a pre-made you like and buy that? You know what you're getting.
Those are excellent answers. And some of the things I hadn't thought about how you guys have to make sure that work doesn't go elsewhere, because it's important that you keep your work. Thank you for sharing about that. I know it's kind of a personal question, so thank you.
Well, and I just want to say really quick, just like every author, but just like you authors, you own the copyright to your books when you're writing it. We're the same way about our stuff. We own the copyrights to our work. And so we have to be very protective of that.
So I know this is another question, but then an author needs to verify with you to be able to use it for like media, right? Okay.
Yeah, and that's dictated by the stock. If it's an original illustrator, that's a totally different conversation. But if it's a photo basher, overpainter, someone like me, I use stock and combine it in new ways. A lot of the terms on what can happen with that imagery is dictated by the stock companies. It's not even dictated by me. So that you can't print it on consumables like tote bags and that sort of thing. So without paying an additional stock fee. So just something to keep in mind before you go, crazy with your book cover and put it on your t-shirt and sell them for $20 everywhere. That's a no-no.
Well, and considering when it comes down to cost, like for us to do the 500,000 uses according to their stuff, and we always have that in our terms and conditions, that with that, we spend anywhere from $1 to $20 per, sometimes more depending on who you got it from, for your stock photos. But if we did the unlimited use that let you do whatever you want with it, it costs us over $100 per photo. And I know personally, I use at least 5 or 6, plus my own painting, plus my own 3D renders. Like I couldn't afford to sell my covers for what I would have to be able to give that. That's why we offer the 500,000 uses first, according to what we can. And then the author is able to purchase those extended rights to be able to do it and do that themselves if they want.
Yeah, because I've had covers, there's like 20 different images in, and it would be just cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
No?
We are at time, so thank you. I wish we could just go on and on because I have so many more questions. But we, if we want, we can head over to panel 6 to be able to continue the conversation. But we do need to wrap up. So thank you, Karen and Mariah and Jamie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you everyone who was in the chat for the raids and the points and the follows and everything. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you guys, thank you. We had a wonderful number of viewers today, and I thank you all, and thank you, Miss Ades, for saving my bacon yet again.
Thank you for hosting.
Oh,
yes,
glad
thank you. Thank you. This is a lot of fun.
So I'm going to share the links to our next events, and then we will be rating writer Greg, who is dealing with outlining the snowflake method. So I am very excited about that. And I just found out we had, and if I'm an organizer, and I just found out we had a continuing the conduit is our raid message. So go ahead and copy and paste that. So for everybody, it is time. And if you guys don't know who I am Amy Winters-Voss, Shyredfox. I am the author of Rise, the Liminal Chronicles. I stream here on Twitch on Mondays from 12:30 to 3:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And it has been such a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you all. And we are going to head over to Writer Greg.